Could gang stalking be a coordinated response to domestic violence? Part 4. The conclusion. My full hypothesis. Quick disclaimer. Before I begin, I want to be clear about what this video is and is not. This video is my personal hypothesis after researching gang stalking, targeted individual claims, domestic violence response, coordinated community response models, and related public safety systems for years. Everyone is encouraged to look at the information for themselves, do their own research, and come to their own conclusions. This video is for research, commentary, and discussion only. It is not meant to encourage anyone to confront, investigate, expose, contact, threaten, harass, or retaliate against any person or organization. Bringing the series together. In parts 1 through 3, I looked at timing, structure, and the systems that already exist. In this video, I'm bringing it all together into my full hypothesis. How it starts, the accusation. So how could something like this start? In my opinion, it starts with an accusation. Not necessarily an accusation with enough proof for an arrest, or enough evidence for prosecutors to charge. It may start with a warning, a fear, a relationship conflict, a stalking concern, a sexual allegation, or a domestic violence allegation where there is not much for police to act on yet. That is where the informal system begins. If law enforcement cannot intervene, the person making the accusation may be directed toward domestic violence organizations, sexual assault services, victim advocates, legal aid, safety planning resources, or community support networks. From there, the accuser may receive help with documentation, safety planning, protective order information, legal referrals, workplace or housing concerns, court support, and recommendations for how to move forward. But in my opinion, one of the most important informal pieces is the public accusation itself. A domestic violence organization usually cannot publicly accuse someone, create a call-out page, or warn the public about a specific person without creating legal risk for itself. But the accuser can. The accuser can speak in their own name, tell their story, warn others, post online, create a page, ask whether others had similar experiences, and collect information. The organization does not have to make the accusation publicly. The accuser does. And once the accusation is public, it can spread through social media, private messages, group chats, survivor networks, workplaces, schools, churches, neighborhoods, and local advocacy spaces. People may come forward with additional claims. Screenshots may be collected, patterns may be documented, witnesses may appear, and eventually that information may lead back to law enforcement. So even before there is a formal case, an informal process may already be happening. It may not look like an official investigation at first. It may look like advocacy, safety planning, documentation, public warning, legal referrals, and community protection. But from the perspective of the person being accused, it may feel like their name, reputation, relationships, workplace, housing, and social life are being quietly organized around an allegation they may not even fully understand yet. At this stage, the accused person may not even know any of this is happening. They may not know an accusation has been made, who has heard it, what has been said, or whether people around them are already being warned. And that is what makes the next stage possible. Coordination can begin before the person at the center even understands that a response is forming around them. How it becomes coordinated. In my opinion, we already have enough examples to show that informal public warning models exist in domestic violence and sexual assault spaces. The accuser is the one speaking publicly, posting online, warning others, collecting stories, sharing information, and communicating privately with people who may know the accused. But the accuser may still be operating with support, advice, referrals, safety planning, legal contacts, documentation strategies, and encouragement from the advocacy world. So the operation is informal, but it is not necessarily unsupported. That is the foundation of a coordinated response. The formal framework and plausible deniability. And this does not only apply to social media call-out pages. If you look at sexual assault coalitions and domestic violence coalitions in different states, many encourage communities to build coordinated community response teams, sexual assault response teams, task forces, and local response networks. But the language is important. These organizations may provide training, toolkits, recommendations, technical assistance, models, and guidance, while still making it clear that the local community is the one forming the team, adapting the model, and deciding how it operates. That creates distance. If something goes wrong, the formal organization can say, "We did not run this, control this, or direct those people. We only provided resources, education, referrals, or a general model." And in my opinion, that plausible deniability is one of the most important parts of this theory. Because what people describe as gang stalking may not require a formal government program, a written order, or an official task force. It could operate as an informal, coordinated community response. And even though the response is informal, it may still borrow the language, methods, resources, and credibility of the formal domestic violence and sexual assault response system. In other words, the formal system can create the framework and the informal community can carry it out. The psychological pressure. In my firm opinion, this model is not only about warning people, it is also about pressure. The goal, as I see it, is to make the target feel like there is already some kind of formal investigation happening around them, even when there may not be one. That is where the mirroring, street theater, repeated coincidences, strange comments, public reminders, and social pressure come in. The target starts to feel watched. They start to feel like people know things about them. They start to feel like private information is being repeated back to them. They start to wonder whether police, investigators, employers, neighbors, or some larger system is quietly building a case. And in my opinion, that is the psychological trap. It creates the illusion of an official investigation. The target may start thinking, what are people being told about me? Is there an accusation I do not know about? Is someone building a case around me? Do I need to explain myself? Do I need to prove I am not dangerous? Is there anything I can do to make this stop? So the pressure itself becomes a tactic. Testing, baiting, and reverse sting tactics. Then comes the second layer, testing. Through street theater, staged interactions, baiting, mirroring, confrontation, and strange social situations, the people involved can watch how the target reacts. Does the person get angry? Do they panic? Do they lash out? Do they start acting paranoid? Do they make threats? Do they try to confront people? Do they say something that can be recorded, screenshotted, or taken out of context? And once the target reacts, that reaction can be used to justify the response. The people involved can say, see, this person is unstable. See, this person is dangerous. See, we were right to be concerned. So the target is placed in a situation where the pressure helps create the very behavior that is then used as proof against them. Then, in my opinion, the model can escalate again. If pressure and observation are not enough, the next step may be a staged relationship, honey trap, or fake emotional connection designed to test boundaries, create contact, provoke sexual or romantic behavior, document conversations, or produce something that can be used against the target. That is where the reverse sting element comes in. The situation is no longer just observing behavior. It is creating a scenario and watching whether the person takes the bait. And if the target does take the bait, that can become the evidence, the justification, or the next step toward arrest, exposure, job loss, social removal, or further intervention. Confusion, isolation, and the online trap. But if all of that fails, something else happens. The target eventually realizes something is wrong. They may not know who is behind it, where it started, what was said, or whether the source is an ex, advocates, neighbors, co-workers, private investigators, online groups, police, or some larger system. So they turn to the internet for answers. And what do they find? Gang stalking forums, targeted individual videos, government conspiracy theories, mind control claims, 1,000 explanations, most of them impossible to prove, and many of them making the person even more confused. Now the target is not only being pressured in real life, they are also being pulled into an online belief system that makes the situation harder to explain, harder to prove, and harder to escape. That is where the isolation happens. The person becomes afraid to talk, afraid to leave the house, afraid to trust anyone, afraid to contact police, and afraid to seek help because they think everyone is involved, or that no one will believe them. And from the outside, this makes them look unstable. But, in my opinion, that may be the point. The real tactic is psychological neutralization. Make the person feel watched, make them believe there is no recourse, push them into isolation, and make them sound unbelievable when they try to explain it. The illusion is not that nothing is happening. The illusion is that there is one official investigation behind it all. In reality, it may be an informal coordinated response. Private communication, community participation, advocacy language, social pressure, staged interactions, and people acting in separate lanes. So the target experiences it as one organized campaign, because, in a practical sense, that is what it is. If multiple people are responding to the same accusation, sharing the same warning, acting from the same belief, and moving toward the same goal, then the coordination is real. That is why the person at the center may call it gang stalking. Who runs it? But now we get to one of the biggest questions. Who would actually run something like this? In my opinion, if this model exists, it is not just coordination, it is cruelty. It is a labyrinth, a psychological maze, a structure that can make a person feel watched, unstable, paranoid, isolated, and trapped, while everyone around them can still describe their own role as reasonable, protective, or justified. On paper, it would not be called harassment. It would be called safety planning, community support, documentation, prevention, accountability, warning others, protecting a victim, offender monitoring, and that phrase matters. Because under the guise of offender monitoring, conduct that would normally look invasive can start to sound justified. Watching someone, documenting them, warning others about them, tracking their behavior, reporting their movements, testing their reactions, or involving their workplace can all be framed as public safety. It becomes easier to say, we are not harassing this person, we are monitoring risk. So who would run it? In my opinion, not the agency directly, not the advocate directly, not the police department directly. The visible coordination would most likely come from someone connected to the accuser side network, a family member, a close friend, an extended relative, a trusted person in their community, someone close enough to care, but removed enough to create distance. That is what makes it so hard to untangle. The formal system may provide the language, the tools, the referrals, the documentation strategies, the safety planning concepts, and the credibility. In other words, the domestic violence agency may give them the playbook. But the accuser side network runs it. Under my hypothesis, this would be an informal response that can still access formal help. The family, friends, extended relatives, survivor network contacts, or trusted community members may be the ones carrying it out on the ground. But they may still be able to lean on formal systems when needed. Advocates, legal referrals, court support, protective order guidance, law enforcement contacts, workplace contacts, housing resources, documentation strategies, and offender monitoring language. So it is not fully official. But it is not fully separate from the official system either. It sits in the middle. Informal enough for everyone to deny control. Formal enough to borrow credibility, language, resources, and connections. So the agency can remain at a distance. The advocate can say they only provided resources. The family can say they were only protecting someone. The volunteers can say they were only helping monitor risk. But to the person at the center, it would feel like their entire life is being quietly organized around an accusation they may have no clear way to answer. Volunteers and official sounding support. And this is also where volunteers matter. The agency may not officially run the response. The police department may not officially organize it. But people connected to those worlds could still help informally. An advocate, retired officer, off-duty officer, former prosecutor, private investigator, security worker, nonprofit worker, or someone with law enforcement connections could offer advice, contacts, language, or strategy. Not officially, not on paper, but as someone who believes they are helping protect a victim or monitor risk. The formal system can deny control, while the accuser side network still gains access to formal credibility. And when they reach out to others, they do not have to say they work for a domestic violence organization. They only have to say they are working with one. Not for one, with one. That one word can make the concern sound official, urgent, and credible, while still keeping the organization at a distance. That is why this model could spread so easily. It only requires a few people connected to the accuser to coordinate the warning, give it moral urgency, and make participation feel like protection. Why people participate. And this is why more people may be willing to participate. If the warning comes from someone connected to the accuser, and that person appears to be supported by official people, the whole thing can feel legitimate. It can feel like the right thing to do. And unlike formal agencies, volunteers do not always speak with restraint. They can repeat the most extreme version of the accusation. They can describe the accused person as dangerous, abusive, predatory, unstable, or evil. They can leave out context and frame every behavior as suspicious. Once people believe they are dealing with someone dangerous, normal boundaries start to weaken. They may even voluntarily break the law at someone else's request, while convincing themselves they are doing it for safety, justice, or protection. From the participant's perspective, it may feel like protection. But from the target's perspective, it feels like a coordinated campaign. The larger coalition structure. And this is also where I think the larger sexual violence coalition structure matters. In my opinion, this kind of informal model is not just being shaped locally. I believe it is being recommended, normalized, or at least made possible through the broader sexual violence response system. State sexual assault coalitions, dual domestic violence and sexual assault coalitions, and ultimately national organizations like the National Alliance to End Sexual Violence. I am not saying these organizations publicly describe it as gang stalking. They do not. What I am saying is that the framework already exists. Communities are encouraged to coordinate. Local groups are encouraged to create response teams. Coalitions provide training, toolkits, technical assistance, public education, prevention strategies, and models for community response. And because these organizations are connected through state and national networks, a concern does not have to stay local. If an accuser or accuser side network needs help in another state, the larger network can make it easier to find the relevant state coalition, local program, advocacy contact, or community response structure. That matters because a person can move cities or states, but the accusation, warning, or risk concern can travel through networks much more easily than a formal investigation. What if the accusation is wrong? And if the original accusation is false, exaggerated, misinterpreted, or missing context, then the entire response can be built on a distorted foundation. Everyone involved may believe they are protecting someone. They may believe they are helping a victim. They may believe they are monitoring risk. But in reality, they may be helping punish, isolate, discredit, or destroy someone based on an allegation that was never tested. Why the target cannot defend themselves. The target may not know who accused them, what was said, who heard it, who's involved, or where the information is coming from, so there is no clear person to confront, no formal case to respond to, no official record to challenge, and no obvious process for clearing their name. And in domestic violence, stalking, and sexual assault contexts, people are often encouraged to believe the victim, act quickly, and prioritize safety. That mindset can make sense in real abuse cases, but it can also mean people participate before anything has been proven. Final hypothesis. So my final hypothesis is this. Some gang stalking claims may be the target's experience of an informal coordinated community response built around an accusation, carried out by the accuser side network, supported by advocacy language and volunteer participation, and justified under safety planning, public warning, offender accountability, and offender monitoring. The formal system provides the framework. The informal network carries it out. And the person at the center experiences the combined effect as gang stalking. Final thoughts. So here's where I am going to go out on a limb. After everything I have researched, I believe the modern gang stalking phenomenon may have been shaped, promoted, or exploited for one central purpose: to create a way to outsource accusations that the legal system cannot prove, especially sexual assault, stalking, domestic violence, coercive control, and relationship-based allegations. In my opinion, this model gives law enforcement, advocacy networks, accusers, and accuser-side communities a way to create pressure around a person when there is not enough evidence for a formal case. It creates an informal investigation beside the formal system, and it operates alongside the public warning model we already see online. And in some cases, I believe this kind of informal pressure may have led to arrests, job loss, social removal, homelessness, institutionalization, complete isolation, or even self-harm without the target ever understanding the structure behind it. I am not saying harassment, surveillance, blacklisting, or community retaliation never existed before the term gang stalking became popular. What I am saying is different. I believe this modern model was designed to obscure the source of the response and push the target toward outlandish explanations. Because if the target cannot identify the accusation, the accuser side network, the advocacy framework, the informal coordination, or the public warning model, then where do they go? They go online. And online, they find explanations that make them sound unbelievable. Satellites, mind control, secret government programs, the Illuminati, directed energy weapons, spiritual warfare, and the more extreme the explanation becomes, the easier it is to dismiss the person. That is the trap, because I firmly believe some people's rights are being violated. But the online explanations surrounding gang stalking often neutralize the very people trying to explain what is happening to them. It makes them believe there is no recourse. It makes them believe everyone is involved. It makes them believe the system is too powerful to challenge. It makes them sound unstable when they try to explain it. And most importantly, it distracts them from the more grounded possibility that this may not be a secret global program at all. It may be an informal, coordinated community response built around an accusation. So when people mock my theory, dismiss it, or call it misinformation, I think there are some questions worth asking. Have you heard a more grounded explanation for why some people would be targeted this way? Is it more realistic that thousands of strangers are being attacked by satellites and secret mind control weapons? Or is it more realistic that some people are being informally punished, monitored, isolated, baited, and socially removed because they were accused of something that could not be proven in court? Because that is the part people do not want to talk about. A sexual assault allegation, a domestic violence allegation, a stalking allegation, or an accusation of being dangerous can condemn a person socially, even when they are never charged. And once someone is labeled an abuser, predator, stalker, or threat, people often look the other way when that person's rights are violated. They tell themselves it is justified, it is protection, it is accountability, or that the person deserves it. And if the accusation is false, exaggerated, misunderstood, or missing context, then the target may be punished without trial, without evidence, without due process, and without any clear way to defend themselves. That is what makes this so dangerous. Because what better way to get revenge on someone than to make the community believe they are a danger to society? What better way to destroy someone than to make every act of cruelty look like protection? What better way to erase someone's due process rights than to convince ordinary people they are participating in victim safety? And because of how this is set up, it attracts two groups of people to the same online spaces. Some may be real targets who are trying to understand an informal coordinated response they cannot prove. Others may be mentally unstable people who attach themselves to the same language, the same forums, and the same explanations. And that makes the whole thing even easier to dismiss. That is why, in my opinion, this is almost the perfect crime. Not because nothing illegal is happening, but because the conduct is fragmented. The roles are separated. The language sounds righteous. The motive sounds protective. The participants feel morally justified. And the target is pushed into a belief system that makes them sound less credible every time they try to explain it. But when you strip away the unrealistic claims online, when you remove the sci-fi explanations, when you ignore the theories that cannot be proven, and when you look only at the core tactics, something much more grounded appears. Public accusations, private warnings, community participation, workplace interference, social isolation, monitoring, documentation, baiting, staged interactions, pressure, reputation destruction, and people acting together to remove someone from normal life without a formal process. That is not fantasy. That is not impossible. That is a civil conspiracy to strip someone of due process through informal coordination. And if someone believes they are experiencing this, I do not think the answer is to chase every online theory, or assume every person around them is part of a secret program. The answer is to get grounded. Document what is actually happening. Separate facts from interpretation. Look for the accusation. Look for the source. Look for the network. Look for the people repeating the same warning. And understand that legal options may exist, especially if there is defamation, harassment, stalking, discrimination, interference with employment, false reporting, invasion of privacy, or coordinated retaliation. Because if my hypothesis is correct, then the power of this model depends on confusion. It depends on the target not understanding what is happening. It depends on the target sounding unbelievable. It depends on the target believing there is no way out, but there may be a way out. Not through fear, not through paranoia, not through impossible theories, but through clarity. Because the most dangerous part of this model is not just the coordination. It is the illusion that the target has no recourse. And once that illusion breaks, the whole structure becomes easier to see.